Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. I would like to start this episode with a little explanation to our new listeners because, well, accidentally, I posted yesterday a tweet on Twitter and it went viral. And now I have so much more listeners than I had before. So here's a short entry. Normally, we are a weekly show about history of the Soviet Union and political events. We have turned to a daily war reporting show, which we're doing straight from the Polish-Ukrainian border, and we're trying to sneak our way inside Ukraine with some aids, which I was kind of yesterday doing. Went to the border with some Latvians who were able to help. I post everything on Twitter because Facebook has banned me for arguing about Battletech, which is my hobby. So I'm on Twitter. If you're new here, please just go to War in Ukraine episode 0 and start listening from there. We only charge our patrons for the edited episodes, not these spontaneous shorter ones, which I'm doing from my hotel number. You'll listen through all of that. You'll understand, okay? But yeah, we have edited stuff for which we charge patrons for, but no more than our weekly show, so that's fine. But go to War in Ukraine episode 0, start listening from there, and if you want to hear some background about the war and everything else, well, then you can check out our backlog, but I don't know. A lot of people do it chronologically. I wouldn't recommend that because our early episodes were from 2014 or something, and they're really bad, I think, personally. But hey, some people might disagree. At any rate, this is your daily news digest about what's happening in Ukraine and everything. And as I'm posting on Twitter all the time, well, for one, there have been protests in Kherson and Melitopolis or something about the war, because people are actively going against the Russians, and they are facing them, and it's been difficult. The nuclear power plant, yeah, despite all the rumors, it's actually safe. It actually was forced to surrender to Russians, and now people are in there. And apparently, the building that was on fire, that was just a kind of a side building. It wasn't the maximum reactor. And as far as I know, as far as people who know something about nuclear reactors tell me, then that's not very scary, or that, they're built to last, really. So that's going to be fine. I myself personally went yesterday with people from Latvia. I found them here in Helm, who went to the border and told me their stories. That's probably going to be in the next big episode, since I just sent an article about this to my newspaper, tvnet.lv. And, I have to wait until they publish it before I translate this to English and talk to you about those experiences. But they're coming. They're coming quite soon, because this is all about the news, and the bigger analysis are in, more edited episodes. I'm going to get some interviews after I get back to Latvia, but for now, all I'm doing is just this. And I will use Igor Girkin, Strelkov, again. And sorry, my regular listeners, but I'm just going to explain this to people who are here and for whom this is the first episode. Igor Girkin, or Strelkov, was a leader of the Donbas group and the people who basically created the uprising over there. He was funded by Russia, and he was the first leader, and he's a Russian monarchist. He's fallen into kind of a hate relationship with Putin because he's even more pro-war than Putin is. You see, he's a maniac, so to speak. He loves the war, he loves the aggression, and he considers this whole thing an opportunity. He considers that Ukraine needs to be crushed, and that someone more competent than Putin should take over after this. And so when you hear these news, these are coming from a person who actively wants Russia to win, but who hates Putin and thinks that an even more aggressive and monarchistic and authoritarian leader should take over. Although no one really knows how that's possible, but yeah, just so you know. And I read his news because he's on YouTube, and he posts for his community members all these news all the time in Russian every day because he has contacts on the ground. So I use this Russian propagandist tools against himself, since, well, I can, and I have people who listen to me. Just so you know. When I'm gonna do my own comments on this, I'll mention that just because the language here seems to be pretty harsh. Although I have to say, in comparison to previous days, he's gotten a bit more tame. So Igor Strelkov about how the situation is going on the 10th day of war. This is going to be mostly about the military stuff, and again, everything else and all the urgent news are on Twitter. And the big picture news, well, once they come, we'll talk about them too. And he speaks about this from the Russian position. So he's talking about various flanks and fronts, and if you hear southern flank or whatever, then no, it's from the Russian perspective. So southern front, which is the left flank, which is Nikolaev and Kryvyi Rog. He doesn't have any specific information about this, and just some sort of misunderstood messages about the activities of the Russian soldiers near the outskirts of the town of Nikolaeva. Apparently, everything's just there, and it's a stalemate. Right flank from Vasilievka up until Pologi. The Russian forces, together with uniting with the Donetsk Republic forces, the separatist forces around the Mariupol, apparently they've started an attack to the northwest, and yesterday they captured the town of Pologi. Although, when he says captured something, again, important thing to notice, Russians move only through the main roads because of Rasputitsa. Therefore, all the maps that you see with all the red painted in stuff, yeah, he'll mention that later too, but they're not controlled by Russia. Russia controls roads, and they attack villages and towns and cities. All that wilderness, yeah, that's where the Ukrainian resistance is at. But this Pologi town is quite important because it has one of the logistical railway lines there. It's kind of a knot of railways there. However, yeah, Ukrainians are fighting back and apparently bombing them. So no one really knows what are they going to do. And they predict active fights against the Ukrainians because the Ukrainians are apparently shortening the front line. The Donetsk front. Well, outside of Mariupol, positional fights were continuing in the positions yesterday achieved by the Russian army. Like I said, Igor Girkin is very pro-Russian, so I think it's more reliable to use him as a source and to be safe rather than sorry. If I would use Ukrainian army sources, then you could just tell me about being biased in one direction and just being more optimistic than I should be. So I'm just using the most pessimistic source for the free world and people who support Ukraine, that's humanly possible. Hey, giving a chance here. So apparently in Donbas, nothing much has happened. People are basically fighting each other on the front line. The front line's moving a bit. The Russians have moved a bit forward, but Ukrainians are calcifying, and Igor Girkin calls the battles that are happening there extremely bloody. Apparently, Russia has just dropped their blitzkrieg strategies and are now moving on a more brutal, full-scale assault. He comments that there's artillery shooting from the Ukrainian side as well. They're bombing the Russian army positions, which is good because Ukrainian army couldn't do that before since they were lacking supplies, but apparently that's serious enough for this guy to mention it. However, yeah, I have to state this out that Igor Girkin states, in this point, the battles are extremely harsh. The soldiers of Donetsk have been suffering extreme losses. Again, meanwhile, if you remember, Russian press and Russian government denies any losses whatsoever. So, front is calcifying in these areas. In Lugansk, Girkin states that the situation is completely unclear. Apparently, the front goes from the line of Yamol-Krasny Liman, which is, by the way, he reported that was taken, but turns out it wasn't because all of this changes by the hour. So that's why I'm doing this daily, and even that is kind of situation can change tomorrow totally crazily. And, still, again, calcification on Donetsk, Lugansk with a ordered retreat of Ukrainian army for them to calcify their positions. Central Front. In the Kharkov district and in the city itself, massive fighting is going on. And it's been bombed, and Kharkov is going to be like Warsaw after World War II after this. Kharkov is just nearly destroyed. They are just bombing everything blindly, and there are massive casualties of civilians. Today, by the way, they told that they would have a ceasefire from the Russian side and from everyone's side near Mariupol. But I have reports that apparently the Russians offered the ceasefire for the civilians to evacuate, but it wasn't observed. They just continued bombing. Well, what to be expected, but that's really sad. Apparently, in Sumy and Chernigov, there are no exact changes. That's the northern part. Ukrainian army has stated, by the way, that they've pushed back in some regions. They've managed to pull off a counteroffensive and pushed back in the north, but I can't attest of reliability of these facts. About the region, which is more east of Kiev, right now, no one has that information. Neither do I, but I'm following everything closely. Follow my updates on Twitter to find this one out. And, right coast front. Yesterday, all day, fights in the village of Bucha, which is a suburb of Kiev, continued, where the enemy here being Ukrainian forces, because again, this is Igor Girkin, not me, tried to counterattack and push back the Russian army. The results are not known with any certainty. Possibly, quite likely, front will be left in the same positions which Russian army controlled previously. Front is without any meaningful big changes. And then he gives out some total evaluation, which I'm going to translate verbatim. Russian forces previously own initiative. However, operative successes only continue in the southern front, which is the taking of Pologi. In the Donetsk group, there are only tactical successes. The group of Ukrainian forces previously hold the base most important positions in the line to the south of Donetsk-Kuyevsk, Donetsk-Gorlovka, and a bunch of other Ukrainian cities. And we can't speak about a quick surrounding of it. There is no basis of that. Together with that, there is a deep surrounding of the southern flank of Ukrainian armies, and that will force the Ukrainian army to further move its forces away from Donbas to shorten the front line and calcify their positions. And apparently Igor Girkin reports that they will leave off some volunteer units in behind the Russian forces to organize resistance, serve as guerrilla fighters, and cause maximum damage to the Russian army. And he, being a fan of Russia and massive supporter of this war, states that the assault of the Russian Federation is now lagging in most of the directions. Well, basically, the operative successes haven't turned into any strategic successes, and there is basically no massive destruction of any Ukrainian army units. And there is a plan in Russian Federation to get in the second wave of troops, which would be mostly conscripts, because apparently at this point 90% of the Russian army's standing forces, which have been sent to this attack, which is like 75% of the total Russian army forces, which are under contract or anything, they've been either lost or as casualties or just are not able to continue fighting, because we've seen their logistical issues, we've seen their troubles with everything that's been happening and going on here. And he also states that there are no doubts the Ukrainian army and the territorial defense forces are also suffering heavy losses. However, possibly even more than the Russian Federation and the People's Republics, and this is in massive air quotes because I don't buy that for 1 second. Losses, and that just might as well be just his propaganda. But he that he states that it's too easy to talk about any capture of initiative by the Ukrainian army. However, the Ukrainian army is resisting fiercely and dealing massive damage. And he also states that ignoring the early mishaps and everything, mostly with the fact that they failed to capture Kharkov, which was an extremely brutal case, and like I said, Kharkov's been bombed to hell and back. Despite these losses, the Russian forces can and still have the potential to destroy Ukrainian army and achieve a strategic and kind of meaningful victory. However, and this is a very sad post by Igor Girkin, a very happy post for everyone else who's listening to this, that this will by no means be a swift and painless victory for the Russians. And talking about swift and painless, well, I listened to a bunch of Russian news channels, and a lot of them have been blocked because Russia has now blocked Facebook and Twitter and a bunch of Western media. Basically, a lot of Western journalists have also been forced to leave Russia. And at this point, people in Russia are just, left alone because there is no martial law there, and a bunch of criminal laws have been taken. So it's just really weird what's going on there. A Russian economist state that probably the Russia has about time until October, and October is the final point. The massive serious issues will start in June, and those are very optimistic news, basically, about all the situation, because no one really knows what's going to happen in Russia. IKEA just closed there, and we had videos about people standing to, lose. Everyone's going to lose from this, because, again, world hunger is going to happen this year, and we need to prepare for it, because Russia and Ukraine were major exporters of wheat, and they mostly supplied their wheat to African and Asian countries, which is really bad. But continuing my tradition with sponsoring gonzo ideas how you can help, there's a site called 1920.in. That's 1920.in, which is a cool gonzo idea to reach Russians who are getting cut off from the world and whose government feeds them basically just propaganda. This page sends messages to random, or you can even enter your own if you know any, phone numbers, and informs them about the war. And there's an English description, and they have a Russian pre-made text and everything. Again, thanks to the hackers of Anonymous. But yeah, Slava Ukraini. Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting the show. Your support has been immense, and that is why I'm still here and active and working. So stay strong, people. Stay strong, people, and I'll continue reporting, and you'll get a properly edited episode soon enough. До свидания, товарищи. And please, if you support the show, then, click the donate button on our webpage, theeasternborder.lv, or become our patron. But more importantly, do send your support to Ukrainian charities. We have links of those everywhere, and check out our Facebook page for the links. And stay strong, and everything's gonna be fine at the end. Like Zelensky stated, the good shall prevail. До свидания, товарищи.